Okay, welcome everybody, and thank you for coming to this whole system event. This is a first for us in Northamptonshire, just in terms of having an event for our BAME health workers and social care workers. So wherever you're from, welcome. My name is Manjit Darby and I'm the Interim Director of Nursing at Northampton. I've forgotten where I work, NHFT, the Mental Health and Community Trust. So welcome. This is going to be a reasonably informal event today. Thank you if you've submitted questions, and we'll spend some time having a look at those today. But this is an opportunity to get together with some of our key community and health workers to talk about the vaccine, to listen to some of your concerns, but also to give you some information if you are struggling to make a decision about whether to take the vaccine or not. We know that there has been lots of coverage about vaccine hesitancy in the press, and you'll have been party to that. Lots of conversations about rumour and speculation about whether you should have it, whether you shouldn't have it, what it will do to you, what it won't do to you. This is an opportunity to have a conversation about some of those concerns. We know that the death rates from COVID are 4 times higher for Black people and 3 times higher for Asian people compared to their white counterparts. So this event is important. So, you know, if we have one person at this event, then that's all right. You know, what we're really keen to do is to reach out and have a conversation. There is, you know, lots of conversations about vaccine hesitancy and vaccine reluctance. So we know that across the general population, when people are booking for to have their vaccine, the BAME population is 10 times more likely not to turn up for their jab. So, you know, and our confidence levels in our BAME communities compared to our white communities are starkly different. So this is an opportunity to start the conversation. What we're going to do now is maybe just have a look at what is the picture in Northampton, and then move on to listening to somebody who's actually been through the COVID journey. I'm going to talk to you about a chap called Richard that I interviewed a couple of weeks ago, who spent 7 weeks in ITU suffering from COVID. So we've got a panel who have given up their time to support answering some of the questions that you've already submitted. Please feel free to use the chat box, and if you've got questions that you haven't had time to submit, put them in the chat box and we will try to answer those. And then we're going to talk to you just a little bit about kind of what the wellbeing support offer is across Northamptonshire. We are just doing a bit of a Slido poll to look at kind of what people are thinking about the vaccine. So questions will come up onto your screen. Feel free to use the QR code, just scan it onto your phones, or go on to slido.com onto the website and use the code hashtag T980. And just feel free to answer those questions. Really helpful just to see what that looks like. So just to give us a sense of kind of, you know, who's already had the vaccine that's on the call today, and if people haven't had the vaccine, just helpful for us to know. So if you've had it, just answer the questions. If you haven't, please just feel free to do that. There's 2 or 3 questions at the start of this event, and then we'll be asking you a couple of questions at the end of it. Do we want to move on to the second question? So we're kind of getting people coming in at the moment on whether they've had the vaccine and how likely they are to have the vaccine. So helpful just to understand that you're, you know, if you've had it, then put that you definitely had it, that you're probably going to have it. If you're undecided, please tell us. And if you're not going to have it and you've already decided not to have it, it'd be really helpful to understand that. I don't know if we've got the opportunity to put in any narrative on that if you're not going to have it. there might be the opportunity to put some narrative comments in. So let's move on to the third question, and that's about concerns about the vaccine. So an opportunity to just put in some, put in some words or concerns that you've got. Feel free to just add any comments that you have that will help us to address some of those as part of the panel conversation that we had to pick up questions and answers. So useful to see some stuff coming through at the moment. The content of the vaccine, the side effects, it being painful, and fertility, very common questions that people have been asking, and then the efficacy and how long it's going to last, really useful. We'll come back to those just before the panel questions. So keep answering those questions. You'll be able to see them as part of your, if you've logged into Slido now. Do we have any other questions for now or not? Is that all right? Okay, so carry on using the Slido and fill that in, at your leisure whilst we're moving through the presentations today, and we'll come back to kind of what the results are looking like before we go. So let's move on then to kind of just what the picture is, Alex. Shall we move on to that? Yeah, Carla, can we move to Alex's slide just to give us a view about what the vaccine take-up looks like across Northamptonshire?
Yeah, so I'll move on to my slides. Thank you all for joining us today. Hopefully you should be able to see those slides are now on the screen. So obviously, as Manjit's explained, the purpose of today is to encourage as many people from the BAME population to take up the vaccine, due to the numbers at the moment that show that BAME population are not taking up the vaccine as much as the white population. So we've just got some facts and figures here from early in February. These have been updated since, but at that point 14.4% of white people in England have been vaccinated, compared to varying levels within the BAME population of about 4.7 for mixed groups, 9.2 of Asian groups, and 6.8% of black people. So there's a stark difference there between the number of people who are taking up the vaccination. And just to put some context on that, for example, white people were more than twice as likely as people from black backgrounds to have been vaccinated, varying again up to 3 times more likely than people from mixed ethnic backgrounds. And in regards to the vaccination take-up across Northamptonshire, the average BAME take-up in the NHS Trust is just under 60% compared to the white take-up, which is 73%. So there's a gap there that obviously we're keen to move that, so that we're getting similar figures across the whole population of the workforce. The total numbers across NHS Trust are 74% and non-NHS are 61%. So there are significant numbers taking up that vaccine, but what we're trying to do is encourage that to be comparable across all the ethnic groups.
Great, lovely, thank you, that's really helpful. So that kind of just sets the scene really for where we are at the moment. I think what we'll do now is maybe just hear from people who have had the vaccine, and Northampton General did a really nice little video which I think it would be useful to play at this point, and then we'll move into hearing from some of our panel. Just bear with us with the technology.
Let me get this video running.
Right, just we're not hearing the audio yet.
Can you see the screen?
Yeah, we can see the screen, we just can't hear it.
That again, bear with me.
You have to click on an option that says share computer audio.
I've done that, it overruled me. Let's try again.
Program. It is absolutely wonderful news that today we've delivered the first vaccines in the county to members of our own hospital staff, those who are at most risk within our organisation, and it's absolutely right and proper that we put them at the front of the queue to take care of them. But this is much broader than that. This is the first journey, the first step in our journey towards the end of what's been a most terrible year for all of us. This is wonderful news for you. It's wonderful news for the patients that we serve. It's wonderful news for your families. And of course, in the coming weeks, we'll be rolling it out much further than NGH around the county to be able to provide the level of protection that everyone needs from this most terrible disease.
Well, I feel very privileged. I think as a frontline member of staff, it's important that we get vaccinated so we can protect our colleagues, ourselves, and our patients. So the process is straightforward. The concern was, the vaccine being developed so quickly. But I think, the safety record seems good from the studies. So I think people should proceed and have it as quickly as possible. I think it's natural to be anxious. We were all a little bit anxious, but it was very much like a flu jab. But I had no pain at all, no discomfort. It was very straightforward. So yeah, I'm very pleased.
But to be one of the first people to have the vaccine is absolutely exciting. It's something we've been waiting for a long time. I was initially a little bit skeptical about it, to have the vaccine first, but I went onto the MHRA website. The MHRA is one of the best institutions in terms of regulating medicines, blood products, and all this sort of thing. So when I went to their website and saw how much work they'd done, every fear I had was allayed. I didn't have to worry about anything else. It was very clear to me that the vaccine is safe, so I thought I'd have it and at least set an example for others who were skeptical. I think having a microbiology background helped me in the sense that I could see the safety of having a vaccine. The vaccines are a revolution. This one is just a bigger one because of the speed at which it was done. Very easy and straightforward. And I have to say I wasn't even anxious coming in. Having the jab is like any other vaccine. I had my flu jab several weeks ago, no problems. This one, exactly the same. I would say take it. Don't be afraid.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Alex. So let's go to Dr. Sanjay Gadia just to give us a bit of an overview about the vaccine to start with. Sanjay, do you want to come in?
Hi, welcome everyone. So I suppose like some of my colleagues that you heard on the video, the vaccine is something that when you're working in this field it is part of evolution. It's part of modern medicine, I'd say. The vaccines that have been released in this country have gone through some thorough checks, and I think the first thing to remember is that vaccines are a tool that allow your own body's immune system to fight the virus, which is a much faster way of trying to treat the virus when you've already got it. So it's the best level of protection that we have. Now, in terms of the vaccine, there are 3 vaccines up till now that have been approved by the MHRA. The first one was the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, and then the Pfizer BioNTech vaccine as well. They're around the same time, and they are currently both being used at the moment across England, across Britain. There's a third one that's also been released, which is the Moderna vaccine, and that will soon be being used as well as soon as we get the shipments coming in. The main thing about all these vaccines is they all work in a very similar way. They all use mechanisms which mimic the virus. So your body thinks that you've got an element of this virus and it produces an immune response. So when you are actually presented with this virus, in reality, your body's already primed. So your forces are already ready to go. And that's the main thing to remember. They all have slight variations in the way they do this, but in general, they all work in a very similar way. They all have a very similar effect afterwards. And the main thing is their effectiveness. There's been concerns about the vaccine in terms of have they been tested, and one of the speakers on the video just now said that one of the concerns is speed. The speed at which they've been introduced hasn't reduced the amount of investigation and thoroughness that's gone into releasing these vaccines. And top line figures are for the Oxford one, there's 23,000 people who were involved in the trials, For the Pfizer one, there was almost 44,000 people involved in the trials. So that for me is a very positive thing. The level of trials would just set up at speed. But the main thing is the vaccines are the best tool that we have to be able to fight this. All vaccines cause minor side effects, and that's part and parcel with all vaccines. And the side effects aren't because you're being given the virus. Remember, there is no live virus in this vaccine. It's something that causes your body to think that it's been presented with the virus. The main thing to remember with all these is that the side effects are usually your body mounting the immune response. So when you're getting those symptoms after a flu jab or other jabs that you may have had in the past, it's your body thinking that it's had the actual pathogen, and it's getting things ready. It'll always be mild because you won't have the actual virus, and it's a small, it's a mimicking effect. But the main thing is that once it's had that, it will be primed and ready to go. I've certainly had my vaccine. I was slightly anxious, but then I don't like needles, but that's just me. So the main thing is, please go get it done. Do some reading around it. Please ask the questions. This is a really great opportunity to ask questions. And being one of, I don't know how many generations spanning across how many continents in this country at the moment, my phone's been inundated from the moment I posted on our family WhatsApp group that I'd had the vaccine from everyone. And I even managed to convince my 94-year-old grand to go and get it, and that was my biggest achievement so far. So, because she doesn't listen to anyone, but that's the main thing. But thank you for your time.
Great, lovely. Thank you, Sanjay. That's really helpful. And I failed to ask you to introduce yourself, but we'll do that when we do the panel. So what I want to do now is remember to carry on posting your questions in the chat if you've got questions or if any thoughts come up. Carry on using the Slido. But what I want to do now is just talk to you about a chap called Richard, who I had the pleasure of meeting a couple of weeks ago. And he works as a bed manager at King's Hospital in London. And he actually, some of you may have seen him feature on the Channel 4 coverage on COVID, because he was followed in his COVID journey by Channel 4. What was remarkable about Richard was that he has been to hell and back, literally. You know, he has been in a very, very dark place. His family have been in a really dark place, and the energy and enthusiasm he had for life and for recovery was quite amazing. So let me share Richard's story with you, and please, if you kind of have reflections or thoughts when you're watching it, put your thoughts in the chat. So Carla, can we press play? Firstly, Richard, thank you for agreeing to talk to me today. I really appreciate it, and it was brilliant listening, just having a very brief conversation with you last week. Yeah. So in this conversation, I just want to talk firstly about you contracting COVID and where you were. Tell me where you were working and what job you were doing and when you found out you'd got COVID.
Yes. So I work in King's College Hospital. Yeah. And I've been working in King's since 2002. And obviously, medicine has always been my heart. Denmark has always been my heart. It was so easy, and I love my job. I just, the smile and that you get when you think you've done a good job, or the patients are laughing, they are happy, their relatives are laughing. That's all I need.
Tell me about when you became ill.
So I manage a team of about 20. And a few of them started testing positive.
Oh, okay.
I think one of my staff, who I've been walking around with, she started feeling unwell. She had a temperature. While on the train coming home, I had my mask and everything on, but I started feeling feverish.
Right. On the same day, yeah.
Exactly. And at the back of my mind, I know, oh, look, I've been with these people and all that. So I was already suspecting.
Yeah.
So as soon as I go home, in fact, I called my wife before I go home that, look, I am feeling feverish. I think I might be exposed to the virus. So please, everybody, when I'm getting on, I'll call again, stay away. I'll go straight to my bedroom so that I will self-isolate. They called me on the Monday and said, oh, it's positive. My temperature was still not coming down.
Okay. Yeah.
I was feeling weaker and weaker. And in fact, my colleagues were checking on me. My phone is there. I didn't have the energy to even pick up the phone.
Wow.
I was so weak. So after 1 week, and it seems that my temperature is going up, things didn't look good. I was getting breathless. So I called one of my respiratory consultants at work, and I told him that I've tested positive, but my symptoms seems to be getting worse. So he suggested to me that I think it's time that I go to hospital. Then after the IV paracetamol, I go to the ward and they checked my temperature later. It was actually 40 plus.
Gosh.
So,
yeah. Did you know how poorly you were, Richard, at that time?
I didn't really feel it at that time. But obviously, all my signs were not looking good.
Yeah.
My blood results, my temperature, that was like, so when he came to see me, they transferred me to a COVID ward. And when my breathing was getting worse, they transferred me to a respiratory ward. And then on there, they tried me on CPAP. It's still not making effect. So the ITU consultant started coming to see me and said, look, we need to transfer you to intensive care. That's where they tried the CPAP. And there was somebody, and they told me that, look, we need to intubate you because we are worried about you.
How did that feel when they told you that?
In fact, I thought, look, I had in my heart that if anything can be done, I'm in the right place. After being on there for, I think, a week and a half, I was getting worse, and they didn't see any hope. So, in fact, my wife, every time I talk about this, and my daughter, in fact, it's happened to them in 5 occasions. Every time we talk about it, they just burst into tears.
Oh, bless them.
Because they had a call from the consultant in intensive care on that day and said, look, we are preparing you. We don't think Richard is going to make it to the morning. They transferred me to St. Thomas's Hospital, intensive care there to have a treatment, something called ECMO.
Yeah.
And they made that decision because my lungs were so bad. Any little more strain on my lungs, it would just collapse completely. So disorientated. I didn't know where I was. I thought I was in a French hospital, and everybody is speaking French, and nobody could understand me. It was so frustrating. In fact, they've done tracheostomy and all that. So nobody could hear what I want to say. Nobody could understand me because I can't speak. So I was crying, said, oh, my family, everybody is dead. And they were telling me, they were holding my hand and they said, look, Richard, you know me, I know you. Look, your family is here. You are going through what we call ITU delirium.
Right.
I still didn't believe them.
So scary, so scary.
I still didn't believe them until they did a FaceTime with my wife. And I was grabbing onto their hands thinking, oh, so you are alive. You are alive. You are alive. It was, there was so much tears.
Oh my goodness. So how long was your recovery? How long did it take you to get back on your feet?
Oh God, it was difficult because as much as my mind was telling me I could get up,
yeah,
the body and everything was weak.
yeah,
But it's just, I had my skin, everything was so scaly. It was tough. I've never seen myself like this before.
How much
I
weight
had
did
NG
you lose?
tube.
Yeah.
They were feeding me intravenously. I can't walk. I can hardly turn myself.
Bless you. How much weight did you lose, Richard?
Oh God. So when they got me back to the ward and they weighed me for the first time, I was 79 kilos.
Wow, goodness me.
And as much as I would have loved to lose that much weight,
not like that.
It was just no energy at all, no energy.
And you've not got back to work yet, so we're
no.
I
really wanted to go. In fact, when I got back home, it was very challenging. In fact, I couldn't even climb up the stairs. I had to stop halfway, catch my breath, and get up. And I said to myself, even before I left the hospital, look, the least I want to be is to be dependent. Never. So I'm going to challenge myself every day, even before I left the hospital, that whatever they tell me to do, I'm going to do it. The day I go home, it was 10th of June.
Oh, Richard.
And then on the Monday, I said to my wife, please, let's just go around the block. So she held my hand slowly. It was difficult, but we went around the block. And so it's like every day I challenge myself to do a little bit more. So now I still feel breathless on the stairs and on the hill. Because my last 2 scans, the COVID has left me with a scarring lung.
Right. You are a remarkable man. Your positivity is just absolutely amazing. And it feels like, it feels like it's your positivity and your mental attitude have really got you through this.
Absolutely. I set myself a target of doing averagely 20,000 steps a day.
Wow.
I think 1 month ago, I did a 5K without stopping.
Oh my goodness.
I believe it's been one of the greatest achievements for me.
Amazing.
So when it comes to the vaccine, I couldn't wait to get it. And luckily enough, my colleagues at work who've been crying throughout my journey, they told the bosses. So I was one of the first people to have it. I had my first dose on the 16th of December.
Oh, brilliant. Brilliant.
And they told me, they were obviously scared, with all vaccines. I said, no, I'll come. So they called me the day, and within half an hour, I drove there and I had the vaccine. And they gave me on the 6th of January to have the second dose of January. And it hasn't stopped me from wearing my mask or, I still carry on. And the campaign is still on, just educating as many people as we can that this thing is serious. And, it's, look, you are vulnerable without the vaccine. At least when you have the vaccine, it gives you a little bit of peace of mind that I've got a bit of protection. And that's a starting point. So my word is, when it's your turn, just run for it. I had no symptoms. The only thing was just like a bit of soreness of where you have, which you have it for any injection anyway.
And, absolutely.
Nothing wrong at all. And I'm absolutely fine. And I will encourage everyone to have it.
Brilliant, brilliant. Listen, Richard, you are one of the most remarkable men that I've met. Your COVID journey has been one of the most challenging.
No.
Smiling through all of it. And your positivity. I can't believe the energy and the motivation that you've had to get better. And I'm sure that served you incredibly well. Yeah. I mean, this must have been an incredibly traumatic time for your family. How have they coped with all of this?
Oh, God, I think very, very, very emotional. And sometimes, I don't know whether it takes a tragedy or a sad moment to unite you. I don't know. But every time we talk about my daughter, or every time, wherever I've been to so many different appointments, every time you get to that point and they talk about when they had that call, they will all be crying.
Yeah.
It is so very, very emotional. And I myself, I feel very resilient. I'm happy to be alive, but I was still very worried about them.
Yeah.
So I contacted my colleagues at work. One of the psychiatrists got in touch to arrange counseling for them. So I hope that, you know, me being home, we've talked about it. It's opened our eyes into new things that we didn't even discuss before.
Yeah.
Believe me or not, I have been the person paying the mortgage and all that. Yeah. My wife does the cooking. That's our arrangement. Never thought that this is going to happen. And they were wondering, they don't know how the mortgage is paid. They don't know anything. So obviously it's opening our mind onto things that we never even thought of before.
Yeah, it's life-changing, isn't it? It's a life-changing experience.
I know.
Wow. Well, listen, Richard, thank you so much for sharing your story with us.
Thank you.
Really appreciate your time. And, you know, I'll say it again, you are a remarkable man. And thank you.
Thank you.
I wish you all the best for your recovery.
Thank you so much.
And get back to work, because it sounds like you're an amazing, fantastic nurse. And they are very lucky to have you. And
thank you so much.
You know, well done.
And tell your staff the vaccine it changes lives. It makes a difference, and then I will encourage everyone to have it.
Yeah, brilliant, and a great note to end on. So thank you.
Thank you.
Really appreciate that, and you look after yourself. Great. Okay, am I back? Okay, can people hear me?
Yeah, we've got you now.
Okay, great, thank you. So, you know, that was just a kind of a very heavily edited version of the interview that I had with Richard. We were talking for about an hour. But what struck me was how life-changing this journey's been for him. It's almost a year now since he first contracted COVID, and he isn't yet back at work. I think that when the pandemic started, you know, for a lot of us in wave one, it felt like it was far away and it didn't really touch who we were and what was happening around us. But certainly this last wave, we all know people who have had it. You know, I've lost a very close friend from COVID, and I think that, you know, we all have our own personal stories to tell about COVID. And I think that, you know, as we kind of work through the questions, if you still have concerns, please do put them in the chat and think about what it is that you need in terms of information or support in order to make a decision about taking the vaccine. So I'd like to move us on then to the panel, please. And if I could just introduce the panel to start with, and then Alex will take us through the questions that we've had. If I just shout out names, if people could just introduce themselves, who they are and where they work, that would be fabulous. So if we could start with Carter.
Good evening, my name is Kartar Singh Bring. I am a lead chaplain at St Andrew's Healthcare in Northampton.
Thank you, Sasvikal Kartar, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Tosie, have you managed to join?
Yes, I have. Good evening. My name is Dr. Teasia Deniji, and I am a GP registrar at Eleanor Cross Healthcare Centre and also the BAME Clinical Fellow at Northampton General Hospital.
Brilliant, lovely, thank you, Toyotsi. Rudo, have you managed to join?
Yes, I did. My name is Rudo, and I'm a clinical specialist respiratory physio based in the critical care unit at Kettering General Hospital. And I'm also the team lead for the cardiorespiratory team. So that consists of ICU, the acute respiratory wards, and also the respiratory outreach team in the community.
Great, lovely, thank you for joining. Itai.
Hi, my name is Itai Matundeke. I'm a consultant forensic psychiatrist, and I'm also the executive medical director at Northamptonshire Healthcare NHS Foundation Trust.
Thank you, Itai. Thank you for joining. And Sanjay, we heard from you earlier, but your opportunity to introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Sanjay Gardi. I'm a GP in Corby in Northamptonshire, and I also work as a GP clinical lead at the CCG, and I'm involved working closely with some of my colleagues. Chris Paller's on here as well, as part of the vaccination cell for Northamptonshire.
Great, lovely, thank you. And finally, Chris.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Chris Pallow. Substantively, I'm the Director of Strategy at Northampton General, but since Christmas, I've been seconded to run the vaccination programme across the county.
Brilliant, lovely, thank you for joining. Okay, Alex, can I hand over to you then with questions?
You can, yeah. So if we start with the questions that were submitted prior to the event. So the first one we've got, and I'll do a follow-up as well because we've had some similar questions in the chat box. So staff get a lot of BAME colleagues that are against the vaccination programme, although we're not sure why. How can we make a difference to staff that have got an already negative mindset? And I think that would also lead into questions we've had about how we can encourage our local communities to be vaccinated.
Okay. Are you going to pick someone to answer the question, or can anyone just jump in?
Yeah, I think anyone can jump in. Or Dr. Toyotsi,
Oh, yeah?
I think you said, yeah. Carry on. Thanks, Itai.
Okay, I think it's important to acknowledge that some of the anxieties about the vaccine are based on some, things that have happened historically. So in the 60s and 70s, there were unfortunate experiments and the Tuskegee trials. Some of the drug companies have been involved in research activities where informed consent was not very good, and that's affected the mindset of some of the people who are from these communities, and that's led to some really deep seated concerns about vaccinations, about big pharmaceutical companies and their motives. I think it's important for us to acknowledge that it is important for us to be sensitive about how that's made people feel. Having said all that, being a person from a black ethnic minority background myself, the decision to have a vaccine should be based on the information that's available to us. So we need to be driven by what the science is telling us about the effectiveness of the vaccine. We should be driven by what the science tells us about the effectiveness and the safety of the vaccines. It's about making that individual choice that will protect yourself, and your family. And it's also important to note that it's not all pharmaceutical companies will have had some really terrible track records. The different candidate vaccines out there. It's not just the Pfizer vaccine. There's an Oxford vaccine, and all of those things are things that you can discuss with your GP in terms of what concerns you and how you wish to proceed with making that informed choice. I'd also add that, one of the things that I recommend is sort of encouraging more of those kind of individual conversations between which are sort of in a safe space. Some people are confident to talk about things in a forum such as this. Some people prefer to have a one-to-one conversation. And for those of us who've had the COVID vaccine, I would encourage you to sort of reach out to your peers, in your work environment, because your peers are likely to be the ones that you trust, and this is really about trust, and this is about gaining confidence.
Thank you. And I think just to add to that as well, in terms of the question around encouraging the community uptake, we do have a BAME community event that's being run this Saturday, and that's been publicised within the local trusts at the moment and across the social media channels. So the next question, oh sorry.
Can I just add on to that? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So everything Dr. Itaya said is absolutely spot on. Couple of other things when it comes to understanding the anxieties some people have raised would be around, some people feel there's some chips in the vaccine, you know, that is tracking them. And there's also the concern around fertility. That is a major concern at the minute, you know, whether it would adversely affect, you know, them being able to reproduce in the future, essentially. And there's concerns around how quick, you know, the vaccine was developed and whether the BAME community is being used as a guinea pig, as it were. And then the other thing would be from a religious sort of perspective, if it's halal friendly, for example, you know, if they're allowed to have it. So in terms of what we can do in the community, or generally what we can do to help, signposting will be useful. The one-on-one conversations, like Dr. Itaya said, would be useful. Simple leaflets as well, because not every BAME member of staff is clinical, as it were. So it'd be nice to just explain, you know, explain it in simple terms to them as well. And then having, from the one-to-one perspective, being able to get your GP, speak to your GPs if that is better for you, to understand, you know, these concerns. If we're faith leaders as well, being able to talk in our different sort of settings about this openly, not being scared, and this will hopefully breed an opportunity for people to express their views about it.
So just to pick up on something you said there, Dr. Toyosi, in regards to the resources that are available, that's one of the questions that's coming from our attendees as well, in regards to what resources are out there that we can direct people to if they're concerned about the vaccine. Have you got any ideas as to where we can signpost people to what's out and about there?
Interesting. Gov.uk is our default. It's been our default because the information is regularly changing. But when it comes to sort of the myth busters, because there are quite a lot of other myths as well that I haven't actually touched on. I know WHO, they've got a good resource on there as well. That's got a list of different myths, you know, and, you know, what the actual fact is. So I'd say you can go online and check for those as well.
I wondered, Gurdar, whether there were any specific ones around kind of in the faith communities that might be useful resources for people to access.
Thank you. I think there are a number of areas which communities can access, particularly I think one of the ones that I've been involved with personally and have been done by many radio stations and TV stations about doing the messaging in different languages, because healthcare workers come from different communities and we live and reside in those communities, and quite often we become the point of call for people to ask questions. And who do we go to? Now, one of the sources that I usually rely on is the British Sikh Doctors Association. This is doctors from my own community, people who look like me, people who look like members of my community, who are giving these messages. And I think that creates a sense of trust. I think Brother Itai pointed out quite clearly, historically there have been issues, and mistrust is a big part of why people will be concerned about coming forward and taking the vaccine, you know, worrying about the long-term impact on this. You know, have BAME communities been a part of the process in making sure that this vaccine doesn't have adverse effects? And I think this is where the work that we're doing right now about, you know, myth busting, bringing in people from diverse communities, speaking with a sense of clarity and authority about the vaccine, I think that is one of the best ways forward. But there are lots of resources that are being developed in lots of different languages, using simple terminology, no jargon, and just putting it out to the community. And I think this is where faith communities have an important responsibility, and faith leaders and social leaders, in combating some of the narratives that exist that are promoting conspiracy theories. The number of times people have approached me, I mean, one of my early questions was, is COVID real? And as someone who's worked in hospital and seen the devastating effect it's had and the losses of lives in our community, it's real. And therefore it's making sure that communities have access to credible information that can reinforce the benefit of the medical interventions that are needed. And it counters some of the echo chambers that might exist on social media, which will reinforce some very, very bizarre ideas. But because people hear it often, it does start playing into their mind, it does start feeding into their daily thinking.
Yeah, that's really helpful. I just wondered, Chris, if there was anything that you wanted to add to the resources that are being made available across organisations.
Not a lot really that the other speakers haven't said. My advice to anyone is, if you're unclear, if you're worried, if you're concerned, there are a range of colleagues in each organisation who have been helping out with the programme so far. The principal one is our occupational health teams, but there's many others as well, and I'd certainly direct you there first. I'd direct you as well, if you've got any specific questions, to some of the chief pharmacists who have been working very closely on the implementation of the programme. We've mentioned the websites, we've mentioned some health communities as well, and if you've still got questions at the end of that, you can contact the team who are implementing the vaccination programme. We're glad to hear from anyone, and we do whatever we can to help.
Great, lovely, thank you. Should we have the next question, Alex?
Yes, I think this question follows on quite nicely in terms of people are asking, why should people from a BAME background trust the vaccinations when the data shows that trials were not that diverse and did not include many people from a BAME background?
Sanjay, do you want to pick that one up to start?
Yeah, certainly I can try. I mean, why should members go for the vaccination? I mean, if we're looking at the evidence that's there, the sheer number of people who volunteered for the trials is the main source, and I think volunteer is the main part. These trials were done with people putting themselves forward. Now there was a mix across ethnicities that went for these trials, but of course it depends on the populations that go forward and the people who volunteer for them. I think what they've found, because remember, when they're looking at the data, they're not only looking at the information from the trials, but they're also looking at information from people who've had the vaccine. So there's ongoing trials still right now, and that's starting to include more and more people from ethnic backgrounds, and that data is now starting to become even more apparent, that the effectiveness of these vaccines, and also so far, you know, the very small number of side effects and issues with them. So I think it's a case of looking at the data as a whole, looking at the information available as a whole, and understanding where this information has come from. And I think I mean I always direct my patients, you know, when they're asking the questions, there's various forums where the information is explained. The NHS website itself has very good links through there, and then when you go from there to through the links, the information there can be put into different languages, which is always really useful. So I think my main advice would be is please look at the information that's not only already come out, but look at what's already still coming out, and people are still going to be looking at how people respond to the vaccine in terms of how well they respond, how long any issues last for, etc.
Yeah, great, thank you. Itai, do you want to add to that?
Okay. So I was just going to say that if you look at the phase 3 clinical trials that led to you know, the approval of these vaccines, for instance, with the 43,000 people who took part in the Pfizer BioNTech trials, about 9.6% of those were of a Black or Black American origin. 26% were, you know, Hispanic, 4.3% were Asian. If you look at the Oxford vaccine trials, again, 23,000 to 24,000 people involved. You know, 10.1% of those individuals were from a Black and 3.5% were from an Asian minority background. I think the spread in terms of ethnicity is reflected on, you know, the level of hesitancy that, you know, those communities have. But in terms of, looking at, the side effect profile, the effectiveness, there was no difference between the different ethnic groups during, the phase 3 clinical trials. It's also worth just pointing out, for people who are of a Black and Asian, minority background in terms of trusting the virus, some of the scientists, some of the key scientists who were involved in the development of these vaccines were actually Black. So, for instance, the Pfizer vaccine, Dr. Tatenda Shapiro, who's actually of Zimbabwean origin, was involved in that. Dr. Kizzy Corbett is the one who developed the mRNA, technology for the development of, the Pfizer vaccine. So, and the Moderna vaccine. Sorry. So, if you look at it, there are lots of people who were involved who are from an ethnic minority background in terms of the development of the vaccine. In the clinical trials that led to the approval, there was involvement of a spread of ethnic minority backgrounds. The safety data tells us that there is no difference between Caucasian and Black in terms of response to that. We're now in a phase 4 kind of observation phase. We've had some recent data published in the Lancet last week. 5.4 million people have had the vaccine. Looked at the effectiveness of the vaccine in Scotland, and it is pretty promising and really good. So I would encourage people to be guided by the science, like Sanjay said.
Yeah. Can we just pick up? Can we just pick up the issue of the kind of long-term risks, given the short-term nature of the research that's happened so far? Would one of the medics like to comment on that? Tozy, do you want to pick that up? Or?
I can pick that. I can pick that one up. So for instance, if you the only way you can make a lasting long-term judgments about any medicinal product in terms of its long-term risk in terms of side effects is if you followed people up over a long period of time, so you can see that data over that period of time. Now, if we, for instance, decided to say only the people who were involved in the phase 3 clinical trials should be followed up over 10 years, with 2.5 million people dead worldwide, from the virus, that would be over 10 years at enormous human cost. And so, my view is, the most concerning side effect ever is death. And, with the virus itself, death is, the major complication that people should be worried about. The design of the vaccines which are approved in the United Kingdom is for the production of something that we call a spike protein, which is the identity of the COVID virus, which allows you to make an immune response. There is no integration with your DNA, which is one of the things that people are worried about the most. So there isn't any likelihood that you're going to mutate. I say this with confidence because I've taken the vaccine myself. I've taken an mRNA vaccine. I've taken the Pfizer vaccine. I've had both my doses. And I put my GMC registration on it in terms of encouraging other people to to have it as well, because I think it's something that is the risk of saving the population versus us worrying about some long-term side effects, which to be fair have been perpetuated by people fear-mongering. Is important for us to look at.
Yeah, great, thank you. Teresa, can I just bring you in, because there was another question about the delay. It was originally 3 weeks and then it's moved to 12. Do you want to make any comment on that?
Wow, I know that is it's a really, There are different sort of ways people have seen that, and the truth is, I don't believe they would have made that decision without having some sort of clinical evidence. I agreed that was not the initial plan, but they've gone back to the table, they've looked into it further, and at the minute it's considered safe for us to wait for 12 weeks for that to happen. And I guess the other thing I was going to also add on was, I know a lot of us have concerns around, we haven't seen anyone that's been involved in this trial. Let's just say I met someone on a different panel the other day, so I can confirm there are people from BAME backgrounds that have been involved. And the other thing would be, I think this should be an opportunity, a wake-up call to say, how many of us actually get involved in trials? So let's use this to reset the way we begin to think and actually get involved and actually hopefully make a difference in the long run.
Yeah, great, thank you. I just want to bring Chris in, because there's 2 or 3 questions about what happens next, Chris, in terms of, is it going to be available to all health workers every year? Are we going to be doing it kind of, what is the plan going forward? And I know there's some national discussions happening about that.
So at the moment, we simply don't know. We all suspect very strongly that this will be an annual booster, very similar to flu, but that hasn't yet been published. It could be a separate vaccine, it could be wrapped up with the flu programme, but almost certainly this is going to be an annual task for us all to ensure that we keep everyone safe. In terms of what is happening next at the moment, and there is a question similar to this, we are now planning the second vaccinations for our staff, and at NGH, who opened their hospital hub on the first day of the vaccination programme. Those staff are going to be called now imminently for those vaccines. The question there, just in case people can't see my answer, is someone asked, I haven't heard, what should I do? And the answer is that staff are being contacted by all of the occupational health departments, Kettering, Northampton and at NHFT. But if you're reaching your 12-week mark and you haven't heard and you're a little concerned, give occupational health a ring and they'll be able to make sure that you're absolutely going to be taken care of.
Great, lovely, thank you. Rido, can we just bring you in, because we haven't heard from you yet? Any observations from you? You're on mute.
You're mute.
Okay. I'm not obviously a doctor, so I can't really comment on the vaccine itself, but being a critical care specialist, ICU physio, I couldn't encourage people any more than everybody has been trying to do, because especially in the first wave, working there were so many people of the BAME background that died during that time. And one of the things that was said is for all our patients that were of a BAME background that were transferred to specialist respiratory hospitals for ECMO, they all didn't make it. So that really was quite sad. But we've also had some very successful stories as well. And the other thing that we are finding out now that we are moving into the long COVID or post-COVID syndrome is that many of the BAME people tend to try and treat themselves at home. And by the time they come through to A&D to ICU, eventually the disease will be so advanced by then. So it's taking a very, very long time for them to recover. And like you were saying, the example we saw in the video, it's 1 year down the line and people are still not back to work, of which if the same as the uptake of the vaccine is the same as in coming to hospital as well. So it's just trying to encourage people to say, come seek help as early as possible. And then also the vaccine, it's going to make a difference. I've had it as soon as it was made available as well, because I'm seeing the impact of it. So yeah, that's my take on that.
Lovely, thank you. So I just want to pick up, let's come back to the religion and the vaccine, Gathal, because there's been a lot of conversation about having the vaccine and religion and the connection between religion and the vaccine and kind of some of the dilemmas that people are facing. Do you want to make any comment on any of that?
I think this question is a very large question, not only because there are many facets to it, but also different religious traditions have approached it with different questions that come in. So with some of my Christian friends and colleagues, some of them been looking at interpreting end times and what are the signs here. Is this a part of prophecy? Within other religious traditions, the ethical questions around, are fetuses used? Are there eggs being used in this process, and therefore is it ethical for us to be participating in it? And I think that a lot of these concerns need to be addressed, with a sense of openness and clarity, because I think, any sort of conspiracy or concern without that clear information coming through, making it very, very frank that there are no fetus matter in the vaccine that goes into your body. In the process of development, there may be something that's there. And I think having those messages coming clear to the community is really important. I think this is particularly when it comes to scriptural reasoning or reasons that are based within the religious tradition. This is, I would say, a place where the responsibility very much lies within the faith communities, with those in leadership, to really help their congregations explore these questions, to understand them in a way that makes sense in the current context. I think with any scripture that talks about the future, all of this must be taken with a sense of understanding, with a sense of knowledge, and a sense of reality that many of these things are open to interpretation. But I think also that faith communities have a real opportunity to encourage people to go ahead, to be comfortable and confident in taking the vaccine, and recognizing that we have a responsibility within our society. Faith traditions talk about looking after yourself, the sanctity of this life. Protecting life is hugely important. Our service to the society in which we live, if by following the rules, if by taking the vaccines, we can enable society to function once more, we can make sure that the most vulnerable are not dying. That's another reason. But I think, even if from a faith community's perspective, if we take it very, very clearly, if this is a roadmap to opening up our churches and our gurdwaras and our mosques and our mandirs and our synagogues again, then that's one thing that every person of faith would find deeply satisfying and positive. So I think there are lots of areas that need to be discussed, and I think this is a collective effort. I think collectively, the medical profession, the scientific community, the faith and belief communities, the social and civic leaders, we all need to work together to make this happen, because COVID does not discriminate against any of us. We are all susceptible to it, and we all have responsibility to do what we can to make sure that we protect lives. And as someone who's worked in hospital, and I've seen in so many good people, whether they are people in the medical profession who've passed away from COVID or people in our community, these are loved ones known by our communities. That's someone's brother, someone's sister, someone's mother, someone's father. I think this is that reflection of what is our spiritual and religious responsibility in these times. And I think that's a question that every person needs to really spend time reflecting on.
Great, thank you. That's really helpful. Itai, did you want to just comment on that issue?
Yeah, it's really positive to hear Kata talking about the religious aspect of it, and if there's anything that the religious community have been quite consistent, as a whole, is encouraging people to have the vaccine. There's some Christians who are quite devout and who've been concerned about having the vaccine because they felt, being, having a vaccine is almost like questioning your faith in God, etc. Some people have been, particularly in the Catholic community, worried about, fetal cells in the vaccine. And it's important for us to clarify that, whilst the Oxford vaccine was, developed using a 1973 cell line from an aborted fetus, the vaccine itself does not contain any fetal cells. So the fetal cells were used in the development of it and in the technology of developing the vaccine, but the vaccine itself does not contain any fetal matter or anything like that. Some churches where, abortion is a very big issue, like the Catholic Church, have actually released statements around the ethical considerations here, and you've got religious leaders from different backgrounds, including the Pope, talking about why it's such an important thing for us to all have the vaccine, and it does not conflict with your religious beliefs.
Great, lovely, thank you. That's really helpful. Let's just go back to the Slido to see if there's any other issues that we need to pick up, please. So let's just have a look at the concerns. So allergies, perhaps we could, Sanjay, do you want to just talk us through the issue about allergies and having the vaccine if you're concerned about allergies?
Sure. So the information regarding allergies is really clear on this one. When the Pfizer one came out, because of some people having severe reactions to this, what the guidance was is that if you are somebody who suffers from a severe allergy, and by that I mean, you know, you carry an adrenaline pen around with you or something equivalent, then it was advised not to have the Pfizer one. With the Oxford one, it's got a slightly different side effect profile. So, I mean, with general allergies, so, you know, to food intolerances or that, there is no problem in having these vaccines. The only patients that we need to be highlighted about, just so we can take the precautions, are those who have severe allergies, so carry an adrenaline pen, or some patients may know that they're allergic to some of the constituents of the vaccines, and you would know that. Or if you're not sure, if you have a word with your GP, or you have a word even when you go for the vaccination, there'll be somebody there who'll go through all these screening questions. Then we can either take the precautions or redirect you for a different the other alternative vaccine. And for those who do have the severe allergies, we're even setting up facilities so that we can still give you the vaccine in a hospital environment, in a controlled condition, so there is no concerns. The main thing is, with all of these, there are options on these, and please don't be fearful. So anybody who has simple side effects and has allergies to certain things, everyday allergies, but nothing that requires any treatment or medication, absolutely no problem. Please go for the vaccine. Don't let that put you off.
Great. Okay, so that's really helpful. Thank you. Toya, so do you want to just pick up on the issue of if you've had COVID, do you still need to take the vaccination?
Short answer is yes. So at the minute, there isn't a clear evidence as to how long you're provided immunity for after having COVID yourself. So it's encouraged that you should still go ahead and have it. Albeit you need to give 28 days from any time you had your positive COVID test or symptoms before having the vaccine. So yes.
Great, lovely, thank you. And its effectiveness against the South African variant, there's been kind of stuff on the news on that. Could Itai, do you want to just pick that one up?
Yeah, sure. I can pick it up. So I think the first thing to say is that there are a number of variants of COVID-19 which are out there. So there's a Kent variant, there's a Brazilian variant, there's a South African variant. A lot of the mutations that we see in these variants are on that spike protein, which I spoke about earlier, which is the surface protein that the virus itself uses to infect the body's cells. However, the mutations, even on the spike protein, do not render the vaccines completely, ineffective. The data that we're seeing from some of the population studies within the UK, such as the Scotland study, which I was speaking about earlier, is showing just the first dose of the Oxford vaccine after 28 to 34 days being as high as 94% efficacious. The Pfizer one is around 89%. So what we've actually seen from actually vaccinating people and following them up to see who is ending up in hospital, is that the vaccines that we've got in circulation in the United Kingdom are actually effective at preventing hospitalization, from COVID. So these are large sort of observational studies with the data that's emerging. So I would encourage all of us to have the vaccine if possible, because once we reach that 90% herd immunity stage, we've got a much better chance of eradicating this virus and limiting the extent to which the virus can mutate and carry on infecting people. So please don't be discouraged about hearing about mutations. There is no actual data that's actually saying that they're definitely not effective. They might have diminished efficacy, but they're still effective, at fighting the virus.
Great. There's a question. There's a comment about cost, actually. So, Chris, do you want to just pick up on the cost issue, because there is no charge for the vaccine, is there?
No, the vaccine is free to everyone, just like NHS services are. There's no cost to any member of staff, any member of the public to receive the vaccine. It's completely free. Okay,
great. Okay, so I'm just going to put up the next set of questions, just kind of having heard what you've heard. Could we just move on to the final set of questions? And as you kind of move through your Slido, it'd be helpful to just get your feedback on how likely you are to have the vaccination. Let's move to the next question. Just a bit of feedback from us to know what to do kind of with the next event. And then the final question, you can carry on doing this while we're just wrapping up. And then there is something about your personal experience and thoughts about kind of how we deal with some of the concerns that we've heard about across the press, some of the concerns from today, things that you think might be useful for us to pay attention to. And whilst you're doing that, Alex, can you come in and just give us just an overview of some of the resources that are available in terms of wellbeing across Northamptonshire?
I can indeed. Let me just share my screen. So what we wanted to do is just highlight to staff some of the support that's available across the county, and both specifically for the NHS and then within the county, and then the wider offering. Obviously, the last 12 months have been completely unprecedented, and the pandemic has given a lot of mental challenges to mental health as well as the physical health challenges. So we're just keen to promote the offerings across the county. We will be sending out a recording and some frequently asked questions following this event. So if you don't catch the names of these support mechanisms at the moment, then we'll be sending them out afterwards. But within Northamptonshire, I just wanted to bring your attention particularly to the Stronger Together, which is the third bullet point. So across the NHS within Northamptonshire, we're opening the Stronger Together service. That's going to be opening in the next couple of weeks, so keep an eye out for that in your local comms across your organisations. And that's a service that's being manned by experienced psychologists who will be offering appointments to staff just talk through kind of what's been going on and how they can support staff members, but not only that, but to extend that out to your family members as well. If you've got people in your family who are particularly struggling, then you can access them as members of staff. Across the country, the NHS obviously have identified that we've got the mental health challenges as well. So there have been a number of initiatives set up, including the confidential support over the phone, and then the wellbeing apps that staff have been able to access. A lot of those have been extended for the free access until the end of March 2021. And the best place for you to go and access that data and that information to look at what's available is the www.people.nhs.uk, and that's available on your desktop, but also as a downloadable app. And then finally, just a couple of points on additional support for specific staff groups. Like I said, a lot of this is contained on the People website, but particularly to bring your attention to some bereavement support for Filipino colleagues. There's some counselling support based on being run by the Association of Christian Colleagues, but that is available to people of all or no belief. And then there's also a lot of bespoke online platforms for social care staff and a Liberate mediation app, which has got extended free access until the end of March 2021. And that's diverse meditation, which is based on being curated for the BAME community.
Great, lovely. Thank you, Alex. That's brilliant, really helpful. And we will be sent, we can make the slides available to put them in the chat or something, can't we? So people can access that information if they need it. So just going back to thinking about kind of what we might do next. Yeah, more role models, honest conversations, and there is there was a really interesting report about is COVID racist published not long ago, and I think that the link between inequality, racism, and impact of COVID on BAME communities is a really important one. So we will do what we can in terms of our personal leadership on this. We believe is important. That's why we're here today. Thank you for everybody for joining today. Any last reflections or comments from the panel before we close?
Personally, two things really. Fertility. I know that is a huge thing, and as per the Royal College of Obstetrics and Gynecology, they have said it's safe to use, and there have been people that have had it and they've had the vaccines and they've been able to conceive. So that so far so good. And people involved in the trials as well, they've gone on to giving birth and no issues so far. So that is reassuring. The second thing, on an open level, herbal teas, please. I know a number of people in the BAME community are using this all of a sudden at home. And, using it in moderation, yes, if you want to use it, I'm not here to advise for or against. But if you choose to use it and you have side effects from it and you need to come and see your GP or go to hospital, please help us help you by declaring the fact that, you used, don't just say you had tea. Let us know what you had so we don't go around trying to think of other things really, so we can help you. So be careful about what you're also trying to use, exercise, and keep having the conversations.
Great, lovely, thank you. So panel, thank you very much for your personal commitment to this agenda and for all the work that you're doing to raise our levels of vaccination in our BAME health worker, health and social care worker workforce. So thank you. And thank you to Alex and Carla and the team for pulling this event together. We will take the feedback from today's event and think about what we do next. But if there are any conversations, feel free to reach out to any others for an individual conversation if you think that will be helpful. The slides we can add to those of you that signed up on Eventbrite, we can put those on there, but we'll also share them with the individual organisations.
Just to add, I've just dropped my email addresses into the chat, so if you didn't sign up via Eventbrite and you'd like a copy of those, just drop me an email and I'll make sure they get to you.
Fabulous, and we hope that's been helpful today, and if you've not had the vaccine, I hope that this has taken you on the journey to making a decision about having it. And once again, thank you everybody for your participation. Thank you everyone.